Book 3, Chapter 58. Continuing with verse 17. It is now the 31st day that we have arrived at this place, and I have caused these maidservants to fall into a deep sleep this morning. Now, Leela, let us go before the willful Leela and use our will to let her discover the form of the truthful Leela and see how she behaves toward you. Vasishtha said. So saying, they wished themselves to be perceived by the willful Leela and stood before her in their ethereal forms of goddess and her inspired dame. At this instant, the Leela of Vidaratha looked at them with staring eyes and found the room lighted up by the full luster of their bodies. The apartment seemed to be lighted by the bright orb of the moon, and its wall seemed washed with liquid gold. The ground floor shone as if paved with ice, and all was full of splendor. After seeing the brightness of the bedchamber, Leela looked up at the goddess and the other Leela, and rising respectfully before them, she fell at their feet. Be victorious, O ye goddesses, she said. You have blessed me with your visit. You who know all and know that I have come here first to prepare your way. As she was speaking this way, they received her with good grace. And then all three in their youthful bloom sat down together on bedding like luxuriant vines on the snow-capped peak of Mount Meru. The goddess said, Daughter, tell us how you came here before us, how you have been, and what you have seen on your way here. The younger Leela answered, As I lay unconscious on that spot, upon the shock of my death, I was enveloped in darkness, like the new moon, and I felt myself burned away by the flame of the funeral fire. I had no sense or thought of anything good or bad, but remained with my eyes closed, under my eyelids. And then immediately, after I had recovered from my trance of death, O great goddess, I found myself assuming, by mistake, a new body, agreeably to my former impression, and moving into the midst of the sky. I mounted on the vehicle of winds and was borne like fragrance to this mansion through the ethereal space. I found this house guarded by its warders and lighted with lamps, having a costly bedstead placed in midst of it. I am looking upon this corpse, my husband Vidaratha, who has been sleeping here with his body covered under flowers, like the spring god in a flower garden. I thought he was taking rest after fatigue for the warfare, and I did not want to disturb his repose in this place. I have now related to you, my gracious goddess, all that I have seen and thought of since I have been restored to my new life. The goddess spoke. Now I tell you, Leela, who has such beautiful eyes and moves like a swan, but I will raise the corpse of the king to life from his bed. Saying so, she breathed the breath of life like the lotus lets off its fragrance. It fled into the nostrils of the carcass like a creeping plant, crawls into a hole. It entered into the heart through the vital breath, as wind penetrates into the hole of bamboo. The breath of life was filled with desires, like the waves of sea sparkle with pearl. The infusion of life added color of the face and body of King Padma, like rainwater refreshes the fading lotus in a drought. By degrees, the members of the body became renovated, like a garden with its returning flowering season, and like the sides of a hill, become green with fresh grown bushes and vines. The body of the king shone like the queen of the stars, with all her digits of the full moon, when she enlightens the whole world with the beams of her radiant face. All his limbs became as tender and dewy as the branches of trees in spring. They regained their bright and golden color, like the flowers of the spring season. He opened his eyes, which were as clear as the sky, their two pupils rolling like two orbs of light, enlightening the world with their charming and auspicious beams. He raised his body, as if Vindhya mountain was uplifting its head, and cried with a grave and hoarse voice, "Who waits here?" The two Leelas responded, "Your commands." He saw the two Leelas in attendance upon him, humbly bending themselves at his feet. Both were of the same form and features, and of like demeanor and deployment toward him. They were alike to one another in their voice and action, as in their joy and gladness at his rising. Then he looked at them and asked, "What are you and who is she?" As the elder Leela responded, "Please hear what I have to say. I am Leela, your former consort. I was joined with you as two in one, as sounds and their senses combined together. The other Leela is only a reflection of me, cast by my free will for your service. The lady sitting here beside the bed is the goddess of wisdom, the blessed Saraswati, and mother of the three worlds. Set her on the golden seat before you. It is by virtue of our great merit that she has presented herself to our sight and brought us back from other worlds to your presence in this place." Hearing this, the lotus-eyed king rose from his seat, and with wreaths of flowers and a strap of cloth hung around his neck, he prostrated himself at her feet. He exclaimed, "I hail you, O divine Saraswati, who does confer all blessings on mankind. Please confer on me the blessings of understanding and riches with a long life. As he was saying so, the goddess touched him with her hand and said, "My son, be possessed of your desired blessing and gain your blessed abode in future. Let all evils and evil thoughts be far from you, and all your discomforts be dispersed from this place. Let an everlasting joy descend in your hearts, and a great population fill your happy realm. May all prosperity attend you forever." Chapter 59. Padma and two Leelas live out their liberated lives. Vashishta said, "Be it so," said Saraswati, and disappeared into the air. And people awoke that morning with their king restored to life. Padma embraced the reborn Leela, who embraced him in her turn. They were exceedingly glad in their coming to life again. The palace was filled with loud shouts of joy, like those of giddy revelry. Citizens were full of mirth and merry and song and music. Sounds of victory and shouts of cheers and joys resounded in the air. People elated with joy thronged at the royal courtyard to see their king. The spirits of the masters and demigod Vidyahars dropped flowers from above, and the sound of drums, kettles, trumpets, and conches resounded on all sides. Outside, elephants roared aloud with uplifted trunks. Crowds of women filled the inner courtyard with loud rejoicing. Men bearing presents for the king fell upon one another in their mutual clashing. Others, wearing flowery garlands on their heads, and hairs moved gracefully all about. Red turbans of joy on the heads of chiefs and a host of citizens, and the waving of the reddish palms of dancing girls filled the sky with a bed of red roses. The ground was also strewn with rosy flowers by footfalls of dancers with their reddish souls. The hanging earrings of ballet girls that flourished with the movement of their heads and shoulders waved in the air like flowers of gold. Silken veils, like autumn clouds, covered the faces of fairy maidens in their dancing. They glittered like so many moons shining in the courtyard. Then people retired to their respective homes with loud applause for the queen's return with her husband from the other world. King Padma heard of his adventures from the reports of his subjects and made his purificatory ablution with the waters of the four seas of the earth. Then royal ministers and ministerial Brahmins joined together in the act of his installation, like a synod of immortals meeting at the inauguration of Indra. The two Leelas continued in company with the king, describing with delight their respective adventures and the wisdom they had gathered thereby. It was in this way that, by grace of the genius of wisdom and their own experience, this King Padma and his two queens obtained prosperity equal to that of the three worlds. The king, filled with the wisdom given to him by the goddess, in company with his consorts, continued to rule over his kingdom for thousands of years. In their state of living liberation, they reigned on earth for myriads of years. Then, receiving the perfect knowledge of holy masters, they became wholly liberated after their deaths. The happy pair, having jointly reigned over their delightful realm of ever-increasing population, and which was graced by learned men and righteous people, knowing their own rights and duties of doing good to all mankind, became freed from the burden of their state affairs forever. Chapter 60. Time and reality are relative. Vasishtha said, Prince, I have told you this story in order to remove your error of the phenomenal world. Remember this tale of Leela and renounce your misconception of the gross material world. The substantiality of phenomena is nothing by itself. No pains are required to invalidate it. It is hard to disprove a reality, but there is no difficulty to efface a falsehood from the mind. True knowledge consists in seeing phenomena as void and knowing the one emptiness to the sole unity and real entity. In the end, one loses himself in this infinite emptiness. When the self-born Brahma created the world from nothing, without the aid of any material or elemental body, it is obvious that there was an eternal void, and that all these were only manifestations of the empty soul. The same creative soul spread the seeds of its consciousness into the stream of creation, and these produce the images as they constantly appear to us, unless we take the pains to repress them. The appearance of the world is only a perspective of the environment, that is divine consciousness. It contains in the small space of human consciousness within the soul, like in a transparent particle of sand. This being the case, then what is the essence of this false conception? And what are our desires to rely on it? And what can be the meaning of either destiny or necessity? This entire whole that is visible to the eye is only false appearance, like magic. There is no truth or substance and imagine. Sure. Brahma said, "What a wonderful explanation of the world you have given me. It refreshes my soul like moonbeams, revive the blades of grass that have been burnt down by a fire. After so long, I have come to know the truly knowable, such as what and how it is, and the manner how, from where, and when it is to be known. I have my peace and rest in pondering on this wonderful theory and your elucidation of the doctrines of the Shruti scriptures." But tell me this one thing to remove my doubt. As my ears are never satisfied drinking the nectarine-like juice of your sweet speech, how much time elapsed during the 3 births of Leela's husband? Was it the duration of a day and night in one case, and of a month in another, and the period of a whole year in the case of Vidarat? Or did any one of them live for many years, and whether they were short or of long durations, according to the measure of men, gods, or Brahma? Please, sage, kindly tell me this, because little hearing is not sufficient for me. Like a drop of water is not enough to moisten the parched ground of summer heat. Now let's take a moment to examine this statement of Ram. It has some interesting features. At the end, he said, "Did any one of them live for many years, whether they were short or longer durations, according to the measure of men, gods, or Brahma?" So this is a curious feature of time. In human existence on the earth plane, a year is different. It is a different span of time when applied to human life and when applied to celestial beings, such as the beings in the Manomaya realm or the higher celestial realm. It seems that the life of men, being measured in years, spanning one day, then we go into the lower celestial realm, that time is stretched out. In one day in human life is perhaps only 1 minute in the celestial realm, as perceived from the celestial realm. And then that 1 minute, which represents 1 year in the earth realm, is like maybe a second or less when perceived in the highest celestial realm of the Creator, Lord Brahma. So it is said that Lord Brahma lives for 100 years, but these are the years of Brahma. Each year contains 360 days, but these days of Brahma are extraordinarily long. Millions and millions of years when measured in the time of men on earth. So what does this tell us about time? It's a great illusion, isn't it? Some people think time is the only constant. Everything else is the illusion, but time is real. No, time is just as illusory as everything else in the universe. So what Ram is bringing up is this whole concept of the durations of time. Now this also brings up another concept, and that is evolution to higher states of consciousness in terms of how long it might take. In human life, it is possible to achieve enlightenment, moksha, in one human life. 100 years in Kali Yuga. So by that measure, we must imagine that the beings in the celestial realms are evolving at some sort of amazing warp speed. But actually, the pace of evolution, development to higher levels of consciousness slows down in the same way that time slows down. So what takes 100 years in the earth realm in Kali Yuga would take millions and millions and millions of years in the celestial realm, and trillions of years in the higher realms. So it's a good plan to go as far as possible in the physical realm. Why? It's all illusion. Once we reach moksha level 1, we've arrived. Why not just take it easy? What's the big hurry? We want to quickly go through the illusion. That's not the reason. Because once we reach moksha level 1, then we realize, looking back on our evolution to this state of consciousness, the terrible fear, anxiety, pain, suffering of all the people who have not achieved moksha. Once we reach the level of moksha level 1, our love for humanity has become very great. And we have the strong need, and it's like a desire not really a desire, but it is a need to be of service to humanity. And we can be of more service at higher levels of consciousness than at lower levels of consciousness. So this is our motivation, the motivation of being of service. Well, let's see what Vasishta says with response to Ram's question about time. Vasishta said, "Know, sinless Ram, that whoever thinks of anything in any manner at any place or time, he comes to feel the same in the same manner in the same place and time. Take, for instance, a destructive poison that becomes like ambrosia to venomous insects that take it for their dainty nourishment. Yet an enemy turns to a friend by your friendly behavior to him. The manner in which any being considers itself and all others for a length of time becomes the same. They appear by its mode and habit of thinking, as if it were by an act of destiny. The manner in which the active intellect represents a thing in the soul is imprinted in its consciousness of its own nature. When our consciousness represents a twinkling of the eye to extend over a kalpa age, we are led to believe a single moment is an age of long duration. But when we are conscious of or think a kalpa age to be only a twinkling, the kalpa age is thought to pass as quickly as a moment. A long night in our unconscious sleep appears as a moment upon awakening. The night appears to be a long age to the long-suffering sick, while it seems like a moment in the nightly revels of the merry. So a moment appears as an age in the dream, and an age passes off as a moment in the state of unconsciousness. The notions of the resurrection of the dead and of one's incarnation and being reborn in a new body, of his being a boy, youth, or old man, and of his migrations to different places at the distance of hundreds of leagues, are all only the phenomena of sleep and respective views in a dream. King Harishchandra said to have thought a single night to be a dozen years. The Prince Lamana passed his long life of 100 years over the space of a single night. What was a moment to Brahma was the entire age of the lifetime of Manu. What was a day to Vishnu constitutes the long periods of the lifetime of Brahma. The entire lifetime of Vishnu is only one day of sedate Shiva, whose mind is motionless in fixed meditation is unconscious of days and nights and of seasons and years. There is no substance and no substantive world in the mind of the meditative yogi, to whom the sweet pleasures of the world appear bitter, as they are thought to be the bane of his true joy. The bitter seems to be sweet by being thought to be so. What is unfavorable becomes favorable, as that which is friendly comes to be unfriendly by being taken in the opposite senses. Thus, Rama, it is by habitual meditation that we gain the abstract knowledge of things. We forget what we learn if we do not repeat in practice. By their habit of thinking, some find everything a state of positive test, while the unthinking fall into the errors of the ever-moving world. Like a boat passenger thinks the land and objects on the shore are moving around him. The unthinking part of mankind and those wandering in their error think the world to be moving about them. But the thinking mind sees the whole as an empty void and full of phantoms, like one sees in his dream. It is false thought that shows white as black and blue. It is mistaken judgment that makes one rejoice or sorrow at the events of life. The unthinking are led to imagine a house where there is none. The ignorant are infatuated with a belief in ghosts, as they are the killers of their lives. It is reminiscence or memory that raises the dream as its consort, and that represents things as they are presented to it by the thoughts of the waking state. The dream is as unreal as the empty void abiding in the hollow receptacle of the intellectual soul. It spreads over the mind like the shadow of a cloud and fills it with images like those of a puppet show under a magic lantern. Know the phenomena of the revolving worlds to be no more in reality than mere effects of the vibrations of the mind in the empty space of the soul, like the motions and gestures of imagined hobgoblins to the sight of children. All this is only a magical illusion without any substance or basis of itself. All these imposing scenes of vision are only the empty and aerial sights of dreams. Just as a waking man beholds the wonderful world before him, so does a sleeping man see the same. Both of them resemble the unconscious pillar that finds images of statues engraved upon it. The Divine Spirit's great monument is the figure of the created world, carved in itself, as if I see a troop of soldiers passing before me in a dream. This waking world sleeps in the soul of Brahma and rises in his mind like the plant world springs from sap, lying hidden in the earth that gives it growth and spring bloom. Likewise, creation lies hidden in and springs from the Supreme Spirit. Like the brightness of gold ornaments is contained in and comes out of the material metal. Every atom of creation is settled in the fullness of divine spirit, just like all the members of the body are set in the person of their possessor. The visible world has the same relation to the bodiless and undefined, undivided Spirit of God as one fighting in a dream bears to his enemy. Both believe in their reality while both are unreal in their body. Thus the real and unreal, the spirit and the world, all dwindles into emptiness at the great fantasy annihilation of creation, except the consciousness of God which comprises the world itself. The causality of the one and the reality of the world cannot both be true, since nothing unreal can come out of the real. Except Brahman, there is no other cause. Except Brahma, the creator, or any other. The divine consciousness is the only cause and substance of its productions. Brahma asked, but what caused the citizens, counselors, and ministers of Vidaratha's royal house to appear in Leela's vision in the same manner as that of her lord the king? Vashishta said, all other thoughts are associated with the principal one in the intellect, in the manner as high winds accompany a storm. The association of thoughts follows one another in a long and perpetual train, and one after the other cause the secession of the sights of the ministers, citizens, and subjects of the king in Leela's vision. In this way, the thought that the king was born of such and such a family naturally introduced the thoughts of his palace and the city and those that dwelt in them. It is vain to inquire into the cause and manner of consciousness and each combination of its thoughts. This is why it is called the gem of thoughts, Chintamani, the wish-fulfilling jewel. It is always accompanied with its radiating thoughts, like a brilliant gem with its rays. Padma thought to become a king like Vidaratha, properly discharging the duties of his royal family. This constant thought of himself as such cast the mode of the mind and manner of Vidaratha upon him.